Explore the world without having to leave your kitchen. Join me as I take some of the most popular dishes from around the globe and give them a healthy twist. Hey guys, it is Bridget Davis here, standing in Bridget's Healthy Kitchen studio and hoping you are well, hoping you are safe. Thank you for joining me. It is another episode of Healthy Around the World, and let's be honest, this is going to be a great one because we are visiting one of my absolute favorite, hands down favorite countries in the whole world, and that country is France. And the dish that we're doing today is literally, you cannot think of this dish and not think about France, and that is a profiterole. So you know that wonderful choux pastry? Yes, I'm going to teach you guys how to make choux pastry that is gluten-free, sugar-free, and dairy optional. I'm going to teach you how to make that. I'm also going to show you how to fill your choux pastry. In fact, it's a bit of a choux pastry masterclass. We're going to fill it, and we're also going to put on a wonderful layer of chocolate on top to make just the perfect little profiterole that is sugar-free, gluten-free, and dairy optional for you guys. I'm excited. I know there's a few of you who are watching this who are just as excited as me because it's such a popular, and not just popular, but one of the favorite little beautiful pastries that come from the lovely land of France. So let's get into the recipe. There is a few little steps that we have to do today, but please don't be put off, and definitely pay attention during this class because I will teach you how to make the perfect bun or choux pastry, and that's probably the technical side. So the first thing that we are going to do is we're going to get our liquid onto the, to bring it up to a simmer. And the liquid is going to be obviously the liquid portion, or part of the liquid portion, when it comes to making our choux pastry, which is the little bun. So I'm going to work straight onto my, my scales here. And what you want to do, get it into the right setting. You want it in milliliters or fluid ounces. Here we go. Come on, guys. All right, here we go. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is we're going to be adding a bit of milk to our pot here. Now, I'm using a non-dairy milk. I'm using coconut milk, but you could use another non-dairy milk of your choice. But I've done it with coconut milk. It works really well. So into our pot, we're just going to add 75 mils, which is 2.5 ounces of our coconut milk. And you guys know me, I like to use a really good quality coconut milk, which I'm doing here. So 75 mils goes in there. The next thing that we're going to be adding is some water, just plain tap water. Once again, we're going to go for 75 mils of water, which is 2.5 ounces. So let's add that in there as well. And it's going to take us up to a total of 150 mils of liquid. So there we go, perfect. We're also going to be adding in some butter as well. So if you want to go completely dairy-free, of course, you can add non-dairy butter here. I'm using grass-fed butter, but feel free to use non-dairy. And you want to add, instead of sort of kind of cut it into small little chunks there, you want to add in 50 grams, which is 1.7 ounces of butter. And then this literally just goes over to the cooktop. We're going to turn it on to a low temperature because you don't want it to boil and bubble up too much. You just want to kind of gently melt the butter, and this is an important step. We don't want to get too much heat going here, so I'm going to gently melt that butter. While that butter is melting away, I'm going to start working on the dry ingredients that's going to be the base for this pastry as well. So in my little bowl here, I have some gluten-free flour. Now, in this instance, in order to make sure that our puffs, our choux pastry puffs up and it's really light, I am actually opting to use a commercially prepared gluten-free flour blend. So this isn't my own one, this is one I bought from the store. I suggest you do the same. So we've got 75 grams of our gluten-free self-raising flour in here, so it's already got the raising agent in it. So 75 grams. We are going to add just a few more little bits and pieces as well to it, and that is going to be something to hold it together, to bind it. And what I'm using there is xanthan gum. You could also use gur gum as well, is another one that you could think about. And we don't want to put too much, we're just going to be putting 1/3 of a teaspoon of our xanthan gum, just gets sprinkled on in there. We're going to add just a little slight bit of sweetness, not too much, just a little bit. And the sweetness that I'm going for is our 0 as sugar, of course. And I'm just going to be adding in 2 teaspoons of our 0 sugar. Get sprinkled into it. And last but not least, when it comes to our dry ingredients, just a pinch of mineral salt. It's going to help to balance out the flavors. That is going to go in as well. So that's all there is to the dry. And giving it a bit of a stir just to mix it through. I'm keeping an eye obviously on what's happening over here in my pot, because obviously the butter, as you can see, is just beginning to melt down now, which is fantastic. I'm going to take myself up a wooden spoon, and as I was saying, this is kind of like a little masterclass when it comes to making our choux pastry. And I originally learnt to do this when I was doing my chef's apprenticeship, when I was at chef school. So it's one of those sort of foundation type recipes that there is a bit of technique involved, but once you understand the technique, it's actually quite simple. And being a young chef, you know, it was one of those, we got tested on how much puff and rise we got out of our choux pastry. But one of the cool things about it is that when it comes to choux pastry is actually, uses normally gluten. So when it comes to this recipe, I've obviously taken the gluten out of it, which means that because I've taken the gluten out of it, we don't have to worry quite so much about whether our choux pastry are going to be tough and kind of rubbery, because there's no gluten, which is really cool. So keeping an eye on it still, I'm just going to turn up the temperature just a little bit. Taking a look at what's happening, the butter is melted now, which is perfect. And I just want to bring it to a simmer. So like I'll have a few bubbles that I might see in it, and as soon as I've seen those bubbles, I'm actually going to add the dry ingredients. So this is what you're going to be doing in your pot. If you're doing this from home, you've melted the butter and you just want to see just a couple of bubbles. Oh, there we go. A couple of bubbles have come out. So now I know that that is ready to go back onto that very, very low temperature. Very, very low, very important. Giving my mixture one little stir, and then I'm going to add in all that dry ingredients all at once and begin to vigorously stir it with my wooden spoon. Remember, all on a low temperature, really important here. And what I'm actually looking for now is I'm looking for this mixture to begin to dry out. And as it's drying out, can you see how that consistency is changing? And it's actually starting to become a dough. So you can kind of see that that liquid is now dried out even more. And I have quite a firm but very sticky dough that I can literally pick up like that. So that is what you're looking for. Once you have got it to that point where you can pick it up with your spoon, just like that, we're going to turn that cooktop off. We don't need it anymore. And we're going to take a large bowl, which I have down here, a large bowl, and transfer the mixture, look at that dough, right? Perfect. Transfer that into our waiting bowl. So give it a good scrape. You don't want to waste any of the bits and pieces that you have in your pot. Here we go. Won't need that pot again. You can get rid of it. So now that we're at this point, you want to take your wooden spoon and just kind of flatten out the dough just a little bit. Make it a little bit flat. Because what you're actually doing here when you're making it a little bit flat is you're adding surface area. which is going to help it to cool down, which is exactly what we want it to do. Because the next stage that's going to happen is we're going to actually start to add some eggs into it. And we don't want to add the eggs to a really hot dough because the eggs will scramble and they'll start to cook. So by doing this and kind of just creating more surface area rather than leaving it in a big ball, we get the ability for that to cool down just a little bit faster. So I'm going to pop that off to the side just while we prepare our eggs. So taking yourself up a jug, I have 3 large eggs here, all at room temperature. I'm going to break them into the jug, and the reason why I'm breaking them into the jug and giving them a whisk, because we want to be able to incorporate them really, really evenly into our dough. So break them in, and grab yourself a whisk, which I believe I have, and make sure it's really, really well blended. So you don't want to see any streaks in here. You want it to be quite cohesive in how it's looking. So pick it up and have a look. It's looking pretty good. And I must say, it's looking very yellow. Like, I'm really impressed with the color of these yolks. They look fabulous. They look like they come from really happy chickens, so that's really good. So when it comes to adding the yolk or adding the egg to the dough mixture, I don't know how much I'm going to need to add. You could add all of this, you could only add half of this. This is going to be very dependent on the type of flour that you use, and every flour blend that you'll find that's been commercially produced is usually a bit different. So I'm not sure how much eggs we're going to use, so I'm going to start off very slowly, and I'm going to show you the sort of consistency that I'm looking for as we're going. So start off with adding probably about 1/3 of the mix, and then incorporate. It's going to look really weird as you're doing this. You're kind of looking like that. Don't look like no pastry to me. And you'll be right. And it does take a bit of time to come together. So you keep on doing this, and it's not a strenuous job, as in it's hard to mix, but it may take you a little bit of time. I tried to do this with an electric whisk and it just didn't feel right. So, you know, persevere with your wooden spoon on this, and I'm going to beat it all in. And you can see that that's changed quite significantly in how it looks now. And obviously the egg in this mixture is what's going to help to give it the puff that we all really, really like. So I'm looking at it, and what I'm finding is it's just kind of like a glob. I want it to be a little bit wetter than that. So I'm going to add a bit more egg now. Probably not quite as much as the first time. I'm going to add less this time. And I'm going to get to that job of beating it in. You know, one of the things I really love about French pastries is they taste really yummy. But they have such history behind them. I mean, this particular dish can be traced back to the 1700s, when a very famous French chef, in fact, he was said to be the very first celebrity chef around the world. His name was Marie-Antoine Carême, and he invented, well, he didn't invent the choux pastry. He actually was the clever clogs who decided to fill it with whipped cream and created the profiterole. So, you know, French pastry and French cooking in general has so much rich history, and I love to know that, you know, when I'm doing a technique like this, sure, we've taken out the gluten and the sugar and potentially the dairy, but the technique still remains the same. So it's this technique, this craftsmanship that's been literally handed down over centuries and centuries that really does make French cooking and cooking from all sorts of old cuisines, old worlds, just spectacular. So you can kind of see again, we're getting a change in the consistency of the dough. And what I'm ideally looking for is I'm looking for something that is pipeable. So I'm able to pipe it into a shape. I'm thinking, just looking at this, and if you're watching this and you're making these at home, then what you want to be really mindful of at this point is the consistency that we have in our choux pastry, because this is going to determine the success or the failure of our product. So I'm going to add just a little bit more. So I've still got quite a bit of egg left. I reckon I've added probably just around about 2 eggs so far, and I'm going to need a little bit more. I don't want it to be too wet. If the mixture is too wet, when we pipe it, it won't hold its shape, and we really do need it to hold its shape. Hence why this part here and you having a good visual indication of what is going on is really, really important. So when I whisk, it's starting to just almost drop off my spoon. Can you see that? It's taking a bit of time. It's a bit labored, but it is getting there. So this, we are so close. I'm going to probably add just the smallest touch, that, like literally, that's it. And I'm pretty happy with that consistency. You saw it dropped off my spoon. It didn't drop off really quickly. It had a bit of hang time, which is important because that means to me that when we pipe these into our balls, it's going to hold its shape when it bakes. So let's have another little look. Yeah, do you see that? Hang time, boom. That's what you're after. This is now done. Happy days. So we are going to be piping these. You don't have to pipe them if you don't have like a little fancy piping bag, but you can also use, you can buy disposable piping bags as well. I think I've got one down here I can show you. That's a disposable piping bag that you can purchase, and they work just as well if you don't have one of these canvas ones. So we're going to be adding in what is known as a plain nozzle. It's quite a large nozzle. I'm going to be adding in a plain nozzle because when it comes to profiteroles, they don't tend to have any marks in them. They're still quite smooth. We push that right down so it comes out the end, as you can see. And the easiest and the best way to fill a piping bag is to fold over the top. So, you know, and then sort of puff it out with your hands, clean hands of course. And you've created almost like a collar around the edge of it, which means it's really easy for me to hold in like that. Can you see? Bit like a puppet, like a sock puppet. So you want to create that little collar of your hands and then grab yourself up your plastic spatula and dollop it into the bag. Fun bits. Once you get to know how to use a piping bag, it's really fun. It is really fun, and it was seriously one of the reasons why I considered becoming a pastry chef. Because number one, I really like eating pastries, but also, you know, you get to play around with all these really cool bits of equipment. And even though, you know, a piping bag may seem daunting, once you do get used to it, it's really easy to use. So scrape everything in, don't waste any. You will get around about 12, so you will get a dozen profiteroles out of this mix. So there's actually, you know, decent bang for your buck when it comes to this. Okay, that can go under there. So then we just fold over the top. And then just squeezing down gently, we're just going to take that air out of the bag, just really gently till we've got quite a nice sort of even, I don't think there's air in there, airless mixture. I can even just begin to pressure it just so you guys see, just so it can start coming at the top there as well. So once your bag is done, you want to grab yourself up a oven tray. I have lined mine with a silicone baking sheet. You could also use non-stick baking paper as well. So this is where the fun begins. So you get to create your balls, and remember we're aiming for about 12. So when you're looking at piping, you start by literally just allowing it to come out of the bag, applying a bit of pressure. But the idea is here, the best thing you can do is you want to get quite even pressure throughout. So whether you're just dolloping like this, or whether you're actually creating a bit of a circle, a bit of a swirl, it's all about the pressure. And of course, that one was a bit big, you also want to make sure that when you're doing this, that you're getting even sized balls as well. So remember, we're aiming for 12. Some of mine are probably a little bit big because I'm talking too much. Some of mine are a little bit big. So yes, concentration is really important. But what you're going to notice by looking at these is that they are, that the shapes that I'm piping are actually holding. So that's how I know that this pastry that I've created, this wonderful choux pastry, is going to puff up in the oven, hold its shape, and I'm not going to end up with pancakes. See, I went too big, so that's why I don't have as many. But you can get 12. If you're not talking while you're doing this, you'll get 12. All right, so you do that. And then what you can also do, if you want just to sort of even out the color quite nicely, what have I done with it? I'll use water. You can either use a little bit of coconut milk with a pastry brush. You could use a little bit of egg. I have egg, I'm going to use egg. Or you can even just use just a small amount of water, and you just want to dab the tops. And this is just going to help the colour to develop. But in saying that, you don't have to do that. But if you've got a bit of leftover, it's always a good idea. Because if you think about it, we're going to be covering these tops with chocolate anyway. So it's not like you need to do this. But if you want to, and you've got a pastry brush handy, give them a little bit of a daub. Doesn't matter. So once you've done that and you've covered your little tops with the daubs of egg or coconut milk, then it's off to the oven they go. So I'm going to be running through some really important steps for you guys now. And this, as you knew, making the choux pastry is an art, and it does require certain procedures to happen. You've just seen those happen. When it comes to baking, there are steps involved as well. So I'm going to run through these steps with you guys now. So step number one is you set, well, firstly, your oven is set at 200 degrees Celsius, which is 390 degrees Fahrenheit, and your shelf is in the middle of the oven. That's the first thing. Now, if your oven is not fan bake, you want to turn it up to 220 degrees Celsius. So you just have it a little bit hotter, but for fan ovens, 200 degrees Celsius, which is 390 degrees Fahrenheit. So you're going, once your oven's preheated, you're going to take your balls of choux pastry, and you're going to bake them in the oven for 10 minutes, and please set a timer. That's step number one, bake for 10 minutes. Now step number two is you do not at any time open the oven door, because your choux pastry will go and it will deflate. I won't do that noise again because I probably can't replicate it, but it will go and it will go down and deflate. So at no time, step number two is really important, do not open your oven door. Step number three, after the 10 minutes is up, you turn the temperature of your oven down to 150 degrees Celsius, which is 300 degrees Fahrenheit, and you bake these without opening the oven door for a further 15 minutes. Okay, step number four, when they are golden and fluffy, let me grab the ones that I've done. When they are golden and fluffy, which is looking like this, you then take them out of the oven. And what I want you to do, even when they're still hot, straight out of the oven, take them out of the oven, and then you turn them upside down. Grab yourself a skewer and just make a little hole into the base of them, just like that. I'll show you again. So turn them upside down, remember, straight out of the oven, make a little hole into them. That is step number four. And step number five, can you guys see what I'm doing? Once I've made a little hole, I'm actually turning them upside down on my wire rack to allow the steam to escape, because we don't want them to stay moist, we want to dry them out. So we poke the bums and then we sit them up just like that. So that is step number five. Step number six is you want to turn your oven off, and then you're going to take this rack, wire rack, with your upside down choux pastry on them and put it back into the oven, but leave the oven door slightly ajar. And step number seven is you leave this wire rack in the oven, just like that, for a further 20 minutes to allow them to dry out even further. So step number eight, once the 20 minutes is up, is you take them out of the oven and then you allow them to cool completely on the rack. Now I know there's a few steps involved, but trust me, once you kind of get into the rhythm of this, it'll all start to make sense. When we are cooking these, we get that initial burst of heat, which is that higher temperature, which helps to give them a rise and to make them lovely and golden. But we can't continue to cook them at that temperature because they will burn. So we drop that temperature down, and when we drop the temperature down, what happens is this begins to dry out as opposed to continue to cook, which is perfect because we need them to be dry. So that is the cooking of the choux, that is the baking of the choux. And at this point in time, once they're completely cool, you could literally store them in a container for a couple of days before you need to fill them. So they do last, they do have a couple of days shelf life on them. But of course, we're not going to be doing that today. We are going to be filling them, and we're going to be topping them with chocolate as well. So I'm going to just get my chocolate on first, which is the chocolate topping. So I've got a little bowl here. and a little pot. In my little pot, I've got about a couple inches of water, and I'm just going to turn that on a low temperature and just bring it to a simmer. Because in my bowl here, I have the chocolate topping, and I've got about 120 grams of dark chocolate, and my chocolate is sugar-free, it is gluten-free, and it is already also dairy-free. If you're wondering where to buy chocolate like this, I buy mine online. So have a look online where you are, whatever country you're in, chances are you can buy this type of chocolate online. So I've got a dark, sugar-free, gluten-free, dairy-free chocolate. I have 120 grams, which is about 4.2 ounces, and that is definitely enough to cover these 12 profiteroles that we've just made. And I've also got a tablespoon of coconut oil, which is going to help to keep it lovely and smooth for when we're coating it. So taking my bowl, you can use a metal bowl or a glass bowl, I'm just going to position that over the pot, but it's very important to allow the chocolate to melt gently, so I don't want the base of the pot hitting the water. So just enough water to get steam, but not enough so that it actually hits the base of that. So I'm going to leave that there to do its thing. While that's doing its thing, let's talk about the filling. So filling, there's a few ways you can go about this. So Karim, this amazing chef from the 17 and 1800s, what he invented was filling this with whipped cream. So your normal sweetened whipped cream. Of course, that's one way that you can do it. Now, if you want to do that, feel free. Me personally, I can't do cream, lactose intolerant, so I will be filling mine with a sweetened coconut cream. So that's option number 2. Now, option number 3, which I know some people absolutely adore, is putting custard in here. So if you want to put a type of custard, it has to be quite a thick one because you've got to pipe it through that little hole, but you can also put custard through here. And guess what? I have recipes for. In my new book, Treat Yourself Healthy, on page 46, which is in the very first chapter, the Nostalgic Kitchen, I actually have 2 custards there, and they're both dairy-free. So I have a almond milk custard is one of them, and I also have a lemon custard as well. So if you want to, and you've got a copy of this on its way to you, Treat Yourself Healthy, I have some amazing custard recipes in the book. But not just that, at the back in the foundation part of the book, I also have other things that you could stuff the profiteroles with. For example, you could think about putting lemon curd in here. I have a recipe for lemon curd. I also have a recipe for sweet apple paste if you wanted to do a fruity filling, a peach crush. Of course, there's my wonderful strawberry or raspberry jam is in here as well, or sugar-free. So you can consider also doing that. And the last way that people have been known to fill their choux pastry buns or their profiteroles with is actually to cut them in half and then put ice cream in them. So you could also sandwich ice cream, and of course you guys know I've got an ice cream plate, so you can make dairy-free, sugar-free, gluten-free ice cream at home in a couple of minutes and then put it in your profiterole. So there's a few ways that we're doing it, but as I was saying, the way that I'm going to be doing it today is by doing a sweetened coconut cream. So when it comes to coconut cream, you need to allow your tin of coconut cream to sit overnight in the fridge or 3 to 4 hours in the freezer before you can make your whipped coconut cream. So what happens is that the solids raise up to the top, and then the liquid stays down the bottom. So that's what happens when you put it in the fridge, is the solids go really nice and hard, and that's exactly what we want to happen. So I'm going to be very carefully spooning the top of the can into my little food processor, which is going to help me to whip everything together. And depending on the quality of your coconut cream, and I'm using, I think this is an organic coconut cream. Depending on the quality will determine how much cream you're able to extract. And I've found in the past with this brand, I don't actually get that much cream, which is really interesting. Even though I know it's an organic one, the quality of the coconut cream itself, it's not as good as what I've had before. So keep an eye on it. You want it to be nice and thick, obviously. But you don't want to take it too far, and what we have there is a pretty well thickened coconut cream. smelling really good with that little speckle of vanilla through it, which is just fabulous. Our chocolate over here, by the way, has melted down beautifully. In fact, I've turned the temperature, I've turned the heat off. So it's just the residual heat from the pot now that's going to keep that really well melted for us, which is perfect. So that is all looking really fabulous. We are going to get onto the game of filling now. So I showed you guys earlier that I have another type of piping bag, which is known as a disposable piping bag. And same filling technique. And this is why if you're thinking about using a custard, it has to be quite a thick custard, and you definitely need to let the custard cool down before you do this because you're going to burn your hands. But because we're using coconut cream, obviously we don't have to wait for it to cool down, which is nice and easy. Let's grab back our spatula. This is definitely a job for spatulas. Don't be afraid of using your spatulas when it comes to this. And you know, it's also a job that I suggest you do when you're just having a day that you want to be in the kitchen and you want to play, because you know there is a few steps, as I was saying, there's a few steps involved, but is it worth it? Yeah, it's totally worth it. Like, it's so worth it, trust me. This is one of the very first foods I ate on my very first trip to Paris, to France. And it was Mahé and I, and we got in quite late at night. We just literally went straight to our hotel room and went to sleep. And the next morning we got up super early. I think we had a couple hours sleep. We got up super early and just went for a walk, went for a random stroll in our neighborhood. And we came across the very first French bakery that I came across. I was like, oh, have to go inside. And you know, my very limited French, I was basically like, merci, tout, pointing at that, say tout, and I got 2 eclairs. And by the way, this particular pastry here that I've taught you, the choux pastry, you can make these obviously. You can make profiteroles, which are the round ones, but you can also make eclairs. And all you have to do when you're piping, you pipe out sausages, as opposed to, you know, sausages about the length of your finger. You pipe out a sausage instead of making a circle. That's how you make an eclair. It is exactly the same pastry. So I ordered an eclair, one for me and one for Mahé. And I couldn't wait till we got out of the store, and I took a bite of this eclair. I sat down in the gutter, and by the way, gutters are very clean in France, and especially in Paris, they're very particular about street cleaning. So they're extremely clean gutters, even though I sat in the gutter and I cried, and I cried, and I cried because I'd never had something so exceptional as this eclair. It, to this day, is still one of the best things I've ever eaten. So I love profiteroles, I love eclairs. All right, let's fill. So remember that hole that we made before, that little hole. What you want to do is take the tip of your nozzle there and just insert that into the base. And you want to kind of hold the eclair and encapsulate it in your hand. Yeah, it is an eclair. No, it's not. It's a profiterole. And what that's going to do, it's going to help you to feel. I'm just putting a little bit of pressure here. It's actually going to help you to feel the profiterole filling. Don't try and say that too many times. And so I can feel that I'm adding some of the cream to it, which is great, but not too much. Fantastic. And you just want to do that with all your eclairs, as you just poke that nozzle in, and then you literally just go along. And the cream is not just going to help to obviously make it delicious when you bite into it, but it's also going to give your profiterole a little bit of substance. So when you go time to dip it through the chocolate, it's not going to completely deflate. So I'll do one more for you guys here. It goes in and you just give it a bit of a squeeze and you fill it up. And depending on how I'm feeling will determine how much cream I add to it. So it's up to you how much cream you want in here. I like to have quite a lot, so when I bite into the eclair, it is literally this bomb of goodness. So these are now filled. I remember which one they are. There we go. So once you're at that stage, all we need to do, once again, is holding up our chocolate. Are you ready? And then off that, just check. One more check to make sure, thank you for going off, that it's still nicely melted. And it is. Very good. Happy with that. So then you take your eclair filled with your chosen filling, and then you just dip it in the chocolate, bring it up, ooh, and and allow it to just set down onto your wire rack. So here we go again. Bit of that action goes in. Oh my gosh. Is anyone as excited as I am? I know, right? This is good stuff. All right, here we go. Just like that. So we've got 3 filled and 3 topped. Now you could stop here. You could literally stop here and go, I'm done, happy days, don't need to do any more. But why not add a few little sprinkles on top as well? So you could also consider doing this. So I've got a little plate here with just a few ideas of toppings. Totally doesn't need it, but if you really want to make them just that little bit more special, why not, right? So I have some rose petals here. I have some cacao nibs, which are really bitter chocolate pieces. And then I just have that chocolate kibble sand stuff that I had before. It's a really noisy cooktop. I'm taking that off. All right, so I'm going to sprinkle some with just plain chocolate because that is just gorgeous. I'm going to sprinkle one with cacao nibs for a love. That's for all your bittersweet friends. All your friends that are bittersweet, they need that one. And then just for elegance, color, and just because you can, sprinkle some rose petals on it. And what have you got? Let's be honest. You have created one of the classics of French patisserie, and you've done it without having to add any sugar or any gluten and potentially any dairy as well. I mean, I couldn't be happier. I'm not sure about you, but I literally couldn't be happier to know that I still get that experience of biting into that wonderful eclair, experience that lovely cream pouring out of it, and then of course topped with that dark chocolate to make it so decadent and so beautiful and creamy. And I guarantee you that these little profiteroles here, once you learn that technique, how to make the choux pastry, you will not be able to tell the difference between choux pastry that has gluten in it and even dairy. You cannot tell the difference. They are absolutely phenomenal. So I hope you've enjoyed today. I hope you get a lot of use out of this recipe. I'm so happy to be able to bring it to you. And of course, as always, join me this time every single Wednesday where we literally will be traveling the world through our taste buds. Today it was France. We've also already been to Mexico. We've been to Vietnam. We've even been to Hawaii as well. So have a look at those past videos. They're all up on YouTube. Bridget's Healthy Kitchen on YouTube. You can watch our past episodes. But you know what? Just keep on enjoying. Keep on enjoying. Keep on cooking from the heart. Keep on cooking with love. And keep on cooking right. We'll see you next time here, Healthy Around the World. It's been my pleasure. Everyone be safe and well. Take care. Bye.